Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University, and Women of Marvel one shot. Eh, this is a 5.99, right? Yep, 5.99 comic book. It's pretty thick boy, excuse me, thick girl. Everybody in here except for CB Cebulski. All girls in here except for freaking CB Cebulski. Damn you, CB, get the hell out of this all female comic book. Like even the editing team, like everybody for the most part, it's all girls, all women. Bang, bang, right? Yet the book kind of didn't do it for me. Yeah, it wasn't that good. One story though did actually make me a little happy. But I'm going to explain a lot of what I think is really going on in here after we give credit where credit's due. And I can't, me giving credit where credit's due. You know what? I really can't. So if you want to just take a look at what's here, because I don't know what they're going to give us for the preview pages, where they finally give us the preview pages. Doing the best I can right here. Feel free to check out those. Those are the people who made the book. But the book starts off perfectly right. Starts off with a foreword by Louise Simonson, right? An introduction by Louise Simonson. They give a little bit of credential to who she is. Oh, she created the Power Pack, and she worked on the X-Force, and she worked on Superman. She was one of the people who were responsible for the death of Superman. You know, one of the best-selling comic books ever? Yeah, that. She's responsible for a whole like a lot of the crossovers that happen. She was responsible for freaking Angel becoming Archangel, right? Like when you stop and you think about this, like Bendis has done some amazing work in his time. But when you think about Louise Simonson, think about just these two things. A major change to an original X character. She turns around and she says, here's Angel, who's a rather blasé character, let's be realistic. As much as you try to make him cool, he's not really that cool. He funds the X-Force. He funds this, he funds that because of his trust fund. You know what I'm saying? Warren Worthington III, he's a rich boy with angel wings that really kind of flimsy, right? A lot of the stuff just doesn't make sense. So she wound up giving him a story arc that was like, holy crap, this is amazing. And it was. She turned him into Archangel, right? And when you think about some of the stuff that had happened with Iceman during that time, where he got that belt, which that's the beginning of him, like, you know, he got way too powerful. He needed the belt to regulate. He was doing because of what Loki did with the cask of Endless Winters, right? And all this was in crossover with her equally very talented husband, Walter Simonson. Hey! Walt and Louise, like these two, man, whew, they were a freaking amazing team. The Morlock Massacre, right? And all of the crazy stuff that happened that were coming up afterwards. Like this was, she's still alive. And I think she's a Jersey girl, but she's living in Jersey with her husband right now. Like this is a woman who did amazing stuff. And the comparison with Bendis is, look at what Bendis did with Iceman. He made him gay, and nothing ever became of it. The only thing about it is that every Iceman story that we get nowadays is which boyfriend is he going to be with, and why does he act so much younger than he has always acted? Like it just doesn't make sense. There's no point. There was 0 point in that. It was like some stupid publicity stunt, which guess what? It failed. It backfired. Not all freaking press is good press, right? That being said, Louise Simonson, pretty much everything that she touches is gold. It turns to gold because that's what she is. That's what she does. She's amazing, right? And even the end of this book, when they give a little bit of a reference to Flo Steinberg, they just say Flo. It's Flo Steinberg. She's the only girl, the only woman who was there in the Marvel bullpen. And she was a source of strength. She was a sense of, hey, why don't you try and make the characters like this? She made her own comic book company to help out women in the industry. There's a reason why women in the comic book industry find her to be so influential. She was an amazing, amazing person all the way up until the day that she died. She helped women in comic books. And that's the kind of diversity that we could use, that we need. The idea that 95% of comic book readers are men is only because it's been catered towards men the entire time. You want more women coming into comic books, you got to give the Flo Steinberg treatment. And that's where you wind up getting stories like Bitch Planet. That's where you wind up getting stories like, I had more in my head just a minute ago, but yeah, things, oh, Saga, right? That's where you wind up getting these stories that like are going to get my wife into comic books, you know? And I absolutely love the idea of that. So you need more women. You need more women. You need more diversity in comics because we're at a critical point right now where comics aren't selling a tenth of what they were making back in the 80s. And the 90s is kind of unfair, but, you know, because the inflated prices and whatnot. But like the 80s at the very least, the last time that comics were important on their own merit was really in the 80s. You know what I'm saying? And maybe very early, like 92, 93, maybe 94, but that's even stretching it, you know? So getting women into comic books is important, which is why I say when this book didn't really work for me, I meant it, but we got to start somewhere. And that's really what this is. It was a start. Aside from Mariko Tamaki and Peach Momoko, I didn't recognize, I think, any of the names in this comic book. I don't think I recognized any of the names of the writers or artists in this book. So they charged a little bit of an extra price to put out a book that's supposed to be, you know, propaganda women. And at the end of the day, a lot of these stories they were really, like some of them were just one-pagers. Like the Lady Deathstrike thing is the very first page where she gets her nails done and now she can't get her keys out of her pocket, which, with all due respect, and hear me out, it was a freaking stupid story. The art in it was pretty cool, but like it's hard to appreciate the art when the story was just horrible. But it wasn't meant to be something. That's the thing. It wasn't meant to be some engaging story. It was meant to just be like a big pun. That's all that it was meant to be. And let's be realistic. Everybody groans at a pun. You know, say everybody calls a dad joke stupid. You know what I'm saying? But you still look back and it's like, you know, technically I can still reference this because this is canon. And at some point, somebody, myself included, might say, you ever seen, we're doing Marvel, maybe I'm going to be playing a Marvel face rip game one of these days, right? I'm going to be playing in the game and somebody's going to be like, the Lady Deathstrike comes at you. And then she turns around and she goes and she grabs this and be like, whoa, whoa. Now, according to canon, and I could pull out this comic book and be like, bam, she couldn't even pull her keys out of her pocket. How is she fine manipulating such and such and such with those nails? At some point, I'm saying I could do that. You know what I'm saying? And it's going to be funny. It's going to be, whether the judge allows that or not, it's going to be funny. It's a little one-page, one-shot, which, what are we really expecting out of it, right? Some of these stories were a little bit longer. And for the most part, also not that great, right? There were a lot of them were kind of like, you know, oh, geez, yeah, okay, whatever, boring, whatever. But like I said, there's a reason why I didn't recognize a lot of these people in here. This is the first shot, the first opportunity to actually do something. And if we want the diversity, and I know that I do want the diversity, because the more people who are buying your product, the more people who are going to be keeping your projects afloat. And I don't want to see the end of Captain America-ness. Now, honestly, if it did happen, all the stuff would just, for the most part, go in the public domain, in which case, then everybody gets to make a Captain America story. And I could pick and choose the ones that I want to read. And Marvel could still do Captain America stories if they wanted to. But, you know, people could do without actually having to work for Marvel anymore. So honestly, I don't care. I honestly don't care at this point. These are really old characters who've been in copyright license for unusually long times, which they shouldn't be able to. But somehow, that's what happens when you get to be a big company, right? And you're owned by a much larger company, probably the largest entertainment company ever, Disney. You get to do things. You get to get away with stuff like that. Warner Brothers is no slouch either. That said, it's great to see a little bit more diversity coming in. And if these are the first stories, the first shots of these women coming in and being able to write and draw these characters for the first times, I can forgive a lot of what I'm seeing in here because, and yes, it's forgive. I know there's going to be some people who are going to be really emotive and they're going to be really offended because some people, it's almost like they get paid to be offended. There's some people who are going to be offended to say, who are you to judge in the first place? I'm a comic book reviewer. Who the fuck are you? But as far as I'm concerned, being a comic book reviewer, yeah, a lot of these stories and a lot of the art, it wasn't great. Some of them weren't even really that good. They were decent. They were passable. But that being said, I do want there to be more diversity. And I understand that there has to be a starting point. And getting a paid gig is a great way to do that. If any of these women in here, this is their first work working for Marvel, then when some of these women in here hone their craft, whether it's the writing or the art, this would be the first work that a lot of them have done. Some of them ever, not just for Marvel, but ever, the first paid work that they've done. Excuse me. That kind of makes the comic book valuable in and of itself. Everybody starts somewhere. Everybody. And while I can say that this book wasn't great, oh, by the way, the story that I did kind of like was the very ending of the She-Hulk story. That was actually fun. The end of the story, I looked at that, I was like, yeah, that was great, because she worked with Rhino. it was She-Hulk versus Rhino. The ending of it was like, I could see the irony there. Like, that's something that freaking Alexei would do. That's something that the big dunderhead would wind up doing at some point. I like that. What happened to, I don't want to give away the story. How he was defeated is a little bit to me, but whatever. Knowing how She-Hulk's powers work, knowing how his suit works, a lot of that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but you know what? It is what it is. That being said, like I said, I really did enjoy that story. I laughed, I chuckled at that story. And that is fantastic. If this is somebody's first work, their first published work, their first paid work, or their first work in Marvel or whatever, that's exactly the kind of thing that I really want to see. That's that exceptionalist kind of thing that I want to see. I'm not here to harshly judge this comic book. I'm here to fairly judge the comic book. And fairly, this comic book would not hold up. If I knew who all these people were, guys or girls, and I read this and I saw the art in this, I'd be like, I would really judge this hard. It's very rare, however, that I judge a Marvel or a DC comic book the same way that I'll judge an independent comic book, one of the indie books, because a lot of these guys, this is their first time doing these things, especially if it's a smaller company like Scout Comics or something like that. I've got to really hate the story and the art and everything for me to come down hard on one of those stories. And I think I only did that with a Scout comic once. Saying there are comics that otherwise I'd be like, this wasn't really that good, but I understand, and it's actually pretty cool. And I'll talk about the exact same way that I'll talk about this particular comic book. I think that this is a really good start for a whole lot of these ladies. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more from them. I'm looking forward to seeing them grow, because right now they're saplings. Some of them are just seeds. And some of the stuff in here is like, this is horrible, right? Some of the stuff is genuinely, I look at it, I'm like, wow, this is bad. This is actually bad. Horrible is probably a little bit too strong a word. I say some of the stories in here are actually kind of bad. But I'm also seeing them as a seed, or just starting to sprout, above the earth. And at some point, they're going to be fruit bearing. And I really want to be around then. And it's going to be a point of honor to say, I was here since they were a sapling. You get what I'm saying? That's one of the reasons why I would say that I would still recommend this book. If you're a speculator, or if you're just somebody who wants to follow somebody's career from the beginning, remember, very few people are breakout stars. A lot of you guys who are just in love with Donny Cates, right? And I like Donny. I strongly like Donny Cates. He just needs to get his act together a lot more. But he's also still very new in the comic book world. So, but he's just made such a big splash. It's hard to judge him as somebody who's still fairly new in the comic book world. But when I talked to him, he got into the comic book internship, like an internship at Marvel in 92 or 94. It was one of those 2 years, if I remember correctly. So think about how long he's actually been involved in comic books. Forget about reading comic books, actually involved in the comic books, and look at where he's at now. And some of the people in this comic book right here, writing and artist, I think this is their first time. And you always got to forgive somebody for the first time. You know what I'm saying? You always got to forgive somebody for the first time. And in this particular case, I'm more than happy. I'm almost a level of exuberant for allowing that. I'm being real when I say some of these stories weren't good. But I'm being just as real when I say you should expect that. For a first work for a lot of these ladies, I'm really looking forward to what comes next. right? I'm looking forward, and this is one of those books I have to, every so often when I see a new name or a name that I'm not familiar with, that I don't recognize, I got to double back and look at this and say, oh crap, this was the artist for such and such. Oh, okay, so this is the new work that they're working on. Hopefully, something like that actually pans out. I hope that this works out for all of these women in here, but I'm hoping it works out for a lot of them, if not all of them. I'm hoping at some point that none of them give up on their dreams, that at some point they all wind up being able to write or draw that work that they were hoping to be able to write or draw, and that they do hone their craft a little bit better. There's going to be some people, the last point I want to bring up, there's going to be some people who say, yeah, but would they do this for men? Maybe. Because they do this for black men, they do this for indigenous men, because Marvel has the Voices comic books, right? And it's only right that they do this for women also. Yes, if you're a young man who is struggling to get out there and do such and such, yes, it would be nice if Marvel would do that for them also. Generally, we want to talk about equality. It would be nice if they would do that for these young men also. And it's not fair that they don't do it for the young men also, but it is what it is. But if they're not just looking to expand more writers and more artists, but they're specifically looking to expand into the more diverse world where, hey, we want more women reading comic books. We want more indigenous people reading comic books. We want more black people reading comic books. We want more people of color in general reading comic books, because I'm expecting there to be a Latino Voices one of these days also. There should be. You think about all the people from Latin America that they're bringing over, right? To do the art in the comic books. I'd like to see some stories also. But at the end of the day, if they do want more diversity, this is the way, and this is probably the best way for them to do that. So again, we already have men doing comic books. We already have white people doing comic books. So as much as it may not be fair for young white men who don't have the same opportunity in this particular regard to do this, and I don't want to hear the people saying, oh, white men have all the opportunities. If you are not a white man, don't get a say in that. Just like I don't get to say that you should come to work every single day that you have your period regardless, because how the hell would I know? I know when to shut my mouth about things. Some of you need to learn how to shut your mouth during some things also. I am not here for any one group, and I am not some SJW. But I will say that if we do want more women in comic books, and not just writing and drawing, but purchasing to keep this medium of ours alive, this is probably, to my understanding, probably the best way to do that, to start that off. And I do look forward to more of these, and I will continue to buy books like this. I just hope that they get more lessons, more explanations, more everything, so that their work can improve, so they can get more quality work. Because I want the quality of their work to increase also. I do want more people reading comic books. I want to see women in comic book stores, like a lot more women in comic book stores. You know what I'm saying? I don't want my wife to feel like, yeah, I'm just going to drop you off in here today, and I'm going to go out with the kids and do whatever, because having a woman in the comic book store can be distracting to some young men, because they're like, she's infiltrating us. Because it happens to this day. It happens. It's the weirdest freaking thing. So I want there to be more people reading comic books. And I think this is a good way to do it. And that's it for me. Guys, like the video on the way out and think about what I said. You know what I'm saying? I don't think it's necessarily unreasonable. But if you do think it is, then without being an a-hole, mention in the comments. We're already reading the comics. But mention in the comments. I'll read them. You know what I'm saying? I will evaluate. And I might even respond. You never know. But I'll talk to you guys later. Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Class dismissed.